The leaves of the humongous 100-foot trees that covered this planet in huge basins shivered in the rising, cold air. I stooped below the tall trees and tried my best to keep my presence obscured by the flowing mist of Giles. It was one of the planets that once belonged to Earth, but it was not within their hands anymore. This planet was in their hands. They were called the Creans, but I didn't care what their name was, for as far as I was concerned, they were monsters to me. I was going to figure out their game, and we'll be the ones winning it. The communicator chirped in my ears.
Captain Dawson! Captain Dawson! Come in!
The light voice of Martinez called. I held my breath as a tremor passed through me from the shaking ground. It was near. Ms. Martinez took my suppressed breath, high heart rate, and silence to read that I was either already aware of what was close to me, if she already picked it up on the radar, or if they were right on top of me. Several seconds later, I'm under pressure as the darkness rained over me and the whole forest floor. They were right on top of me now. An Ozcar. These were the ugly-faced monstrosities that people feared the most. They walked on 4 legs and looked like an insect, with a head that was bitten up and barfed out by a playful tiger. The only thing distinct was the red orb on its forehead and the wingspan on top of its head. That orb was the last thing I wanted to be in front of. The beam that came out of it burned hotter than a volcano, according to the few survivors from Giles and the other colony planet these heathens have taken over. The Ozcar thundered over me and through the forest. Its feet crushed ferns, shrubs, and knocked down trees, breaking them at the ends. Resounding groans of the earth depressed under the heavy weight of its feet. The crackling shatter of the wood made me shudder, but I controlled myself and tried not to lose my cool. Just stay still. It wouldn't find me, was what I told myself. The Ozcar passed and left me breathing easier. That was a close call, but it told me one thing. I was getting close to their center of operations.
Captain Dawson!
I inhaled and shook my head. Martinez, what's my status? Ms. Martinez answered.
Okay. I'm glad you're safe.
You see my pulse?
Sorry, Captain Dawson, but you didn't have your viewer on, so I couldn't see anything. I could only hear what was going on.
The suit I had on was built for this mission not only because of the invisibility cloak that it had, but because it was adjusted to be connected to the cruiser and Martinez's watch station. That cruiser was currently in the orbit of Giles. Martinez was back on Earth. It wasn't only my pulse. This suit was built to read my health and everything needed for the mission's objectives. So my suit's viewer allowed whatever I saw to be recorded and sent to Martinez in real time. I swallowed a lump knowing this fact. If I died, it didn't matter. They got what they wanted. My viewer was turned on, and I slowly slipped out of cover. I asked, "Where's my checkpoint? I can only predict it since these freaks are coming from the valley." Martinez was my handler and my only contact off this gloomy planet. I lose her, and I was on my own. Especially with the lack of knowledge that we have on this alien invader, we couldn't risk any more than one secure connection to me. She never lost her step and answered,
"In the hills. You dropped down perfectly, so only 800 yards separate you and them. Stick to the river in the valley, and once you get there, you can climb up the hill and you'll see it. I updated your scanner. Just follow the signal."
"Thanks. Over and out." The last thing we wanted was for them to be tipped to what we were planning. They would only need to hack one, and that would be the end of everything. My commanding officer was telling me some foolishness about him not trusting the other countries meddling with the operation, which was fair. People are scared, and when they get pushed into a corner, they make stupid decisions. I was front and center in a lot of dumb, warring conflicts caused by fear and misunderstanding. Moving from my spot, I got closer and saw more Ozcars. They were going in the same direction the last one went, so they're probably all going to the crash site. That pod I came down with buried itself before I left. Let them be confused for the next couple of hours trying to find it. I navigated the moist earth and the immense forest complemented with flowers so bright and leaves wet with the moisture of the absent rain. Soon, I found myself in front of the large, makeshift complex constructed of wood from the forest that surrounded their Evasion ship. Their ship looked like a pointed egg, but with panels being pushed out by metal arms from its exterior. It looked like a frightening sight as it stood over every tree. How did all the Ozcars fit in that thing? A yelp prompted me to duck behind a tree. My eyes caught sight of a whimpering dog jogging away. An Ozcar stepped over the dog and past me. They didn't touch the animals. Was it because they were not a threat? We were still trying to figure out who these invaders were, and all we knew was that they wanted to destroy us, and they knew us like the back of our hand. Our colonies were taken over effortlessly. They must have been watching us. Well, it was time for them to get watched themselves. I turned on the invisibility cloak, kept low, and moved through the forest line, hugging the complex's border. As an ex-American soldier, I never trusted the army enough to go back into conflict. But as much as I hated war, if the planet was going to be destroyed, what choice did I have? I had to make some effort to stop this disaster from continuing. If I didn't, my family was going to get destroyed with it, and that was not going to happen. The crunching steps of Ozcars shook the earth and rattled my body with a terror uncompromising to the core. Stranger sounds had my head flipping around looking for anything that could be a danger to me. My feet stepped over old scraps of metal from our machines, if not our homes. I caught hills of personal effects from our conquered cities, sitting haphazardly around the tallest building. A tower. The tower had red orbs, rotated in huge, semicircular metal shields, and I hoped they weren't some type of thermographic camera. My eyes shifted to the makeshift hills of books, electronics, and clothes. Most were partially burned. Such was the cruelty of war. I was used to this, but I thought I was done with this business. I stepped over a broken dole and past the tower. My legs were tense as I slipped down a narrow corridor with glossy tiles and came out into a patchy grass field. War raged on Earth between the conglomerate of countries under the Global Horrors Network, or GHN for short, who have been fighting against the Rebel Alliance. I was now working for the combined forces of them. There was no way they were going to go at each other's necks when a stronger enemy was on the horizon. My target was to find information, but I was going in blind. What did we know? Nothing. All we had were the accounts of people that escaped the wrath of these invaders. Our telescopes provided some idea of their military installments and expansion across the planet's surface. This place was deemed the most traveled and was the center of their operations. As I got deeper into their grounds, the tall structures with wooden bases but metal fastenings were built with such intricate craft and meticulousness. Some structures were still being built by Ozcars, grabbing, cutting, and refining pieces of lumber. That was when I saw them. One of the escaped persons told us about them. A Krian. Unlike the ugly, insect-looking Ozkar, the Krian was more humanoid. They were as big as our tallest humans, but they wore bulky black suits with faceless helmets and carried guns larger than life. A single red orb shined in the center of the helmet. I spoke. Martinez, you see this?
Yes, Captain Dawson. Still surprising to me. They don't look that dangerous to me.
I would have said that myself, but looks can be deceiving. Getting this far meant their security didn't pick up any heat signatures or high-frequency signals, which was great for us. They weren't perfect and complacent in that area. Was it arrogance, maybe? That would be revealed soon enough. I laid listening devices onto the wall. They pierced and snapped into the surface. The Krians watched over the Ozkars hard at work. It looked like they were already planning to settle on this planet. But I wanted to see if they were plans, weapons I could see, and any secrets I could find out. Were they planning to leave this rock soon? And when? These were questions everybody wanted to know, and I was the only man that could get it for them. In the shadow of a structure, I peeked at a Krian moving across an intersection and into the center of the complex where a lot of construction was going on. It was best to stay away from the center and stay on the borders of this place. A thud piqued my attention, but as I turned around, a Krian stood right over me. I stiffened in fright. The Krian was holding a large container. My heart jumped into my throat as I backpedaled. The Krian moved towards me. A rock moved as my boot hits it. The Krian stopped and turned its head toward the rock. I froze. Please tell me I did not get this far just to get caught right now. The Krian moved around me and toward the rock, making a momentary glance at it before looking up and going around me. My throat relaxed. I was safe. For now. My head flipped around to make sure I was good to move. I wasn't used to moving around invisible like this. Got to remember to look before I walk. Lost in the shadows, I followed the Krian carrying that container. Because if they had storage, I wanted to get an idea of where they stored anything. Keeping my distance, we reached the edge of an interesting building. Smaller, but wider, the center of which a hole rested. Around it, Ozkars slept in an akimbo posture. There were a lot more Krians moving containers from what looked like a circular elevator on an edge of the hole. That hole must be an entrance to an underground bunker. If they had food stores or even weapons, they were probably being stored down there. Good. I hoped Martinez was getting this through my viewer. Their vocal language was a lot more interesting, but I couldn't decipher it. I looked around and hoped no one was close enough to expose me. A loud, whooshing roar had me shivering. That sound dissipated as the grinding hovercraft's engine slowed to a stop 10 yards away. My eyes widened, not because Krians didn't react to it, outside of stepping back to give it space to park itself close to the entrance. It was because it was a human vehicle. Did they steal it? I did see stolen objects from the human settlements they conquered, but if they were commandeering our vehicles, that was going to be a concern. Krians gathered in closer proximity to the craft that soon lowered itself to the ground. I waited. 3 new figures came out of the craft and into the room. As my eyes zeroed upon them, I couldn't help the sinking familiarity of them. These couldn't be Krians either. They were too skinny and short. Krians towered at 6 feet or more. I should know, because I saw one far too close for comfort, in my opinion, several minutes ago. They were talking, and from the gestures of the hands and body it looked more like an argument. Each group was on either side, like an invisible wall partitioned them, and little effort was made to quell their war of words. It wasn't the fact that they were arguing that was interesting to me. It was the sound of their voices. A Korean's natural voice was akin to the strum of a well-tuned guitar, but the voices of the new visitors were dead and void of any warmth. It sounded like a cheap artificial intelligence robot I would buy at a corner shop. My heart thumped in my chest, trying to escape this claustrophobic cage. This couldn't be real. But here I was suppressing my thoughts for the sake of giving the benefit of the doubt to what I was witnessing. I held my breath and hoped I was wrong, that my skeptical mind was playing tricks on me. It was the one time in my life that I hoped that humanity would prove me a liar. A war dog was never wrong, though. One of the new entrants took off his helmet, and that was the end of my whirling thoughts, because those thoughts froze. My heart stopped. Everything became dark as I stared at the shameful sight. My fist clenched tight in fury. The man who took off his helmet was human. Human beings were standing in non-confrontational discussion with the enemy. It sickened me to my stomach. Didn't they know how many human beings died? How many were killed, trampled and burned to a crisp by their alien friends? Or did they not care? I continued watching the discussion. That human reached inside one of the containers next to him and took out a tree root I have never seen before. This must have been from the Koreans' planet. The human ate a piece of it. These bastards were betraying us for food? My teeth almost clattered into each other in unfettered rage. This couldn't be real. But I pushed down my desire to rush out and throttle these traitors. Even if I wanted to, I didn't have any weapons outside of a blaster pistol. With all of these Koreans, it would be a suicide mission, and besides, I didn't want to tip off that we knew they were cooperating behind our backs. Their ignorance was going to be our strength. It still infuriated me, though. The Koreans kept up the aggression, while the human who took off his helmet just watched as his comrades talked to the aliens. Did he remove the vocal device? It must be in the helmet then, so that's how they were translating. It was a possibility, and as my eyes focused on that helmet, a clank emitted. My eyes shot up to see the elevator come up with a set of Koreans and goods. One Korean stood apart from the rest, with a shiny purple coat that reflected the light around it with such a glare. The suit had a large pack on its back, and a series of coloured tiny emblems crossing the neckline of it. This Korean was different, and the moment he stepped between the two arguing parties, they silenced their quibble. The human who took off his helmet immediately put it on, and all the humans and Koreans straightened up like a bunch of school children around the principal. I knew who had the power in this relationship. The Korean leader, I assumed, in his glossy purple armor, gestured to the humans and spoke, briefly. A Korean reached into another container and took out a gun, one unfamiliar to me. Of course, weapons were part of the deal too. What did the humans offer? Cardboard boxes of paper, documents from what I could see. I wished I could get closer and see the contents, but that was too risky. These boxes of documents were soon taken down the hole and out of sight, never to see the light again. The Korean leader walked off with a strut, and his bodyguards kept in lockstep close behind their leader. The humans took the containers and jumped into the hovercraft. Once it pulled out, the Koreans went back to their duties. I needed that helmet. Having a key to the Korean language would be a game changer for us. These bastards stabbed us in the back and betrayed us. No wonder the aliens had so much success, because they were getting guidance from our own people. Why would they do this? But even more than that, what would they gain? It didn't make any sense, but this was what I was seeing right in front of me. This had to be true. There was no way around it. I turned and walked around the pillar. After slipping under an Oscar, I made my way to the border of this place. The shrubs were my savior. I said, "Martinez, did you see that?"
Captain Dawson, I don't know what you expect me to say. I was hoping you could explain it to me.
If it smells like it, it's probably it. I got to ask, we're the only ones on this connection, yeah?
Yes, Captain Dawson. What are you suggesting?
That my superior was right. But about who? I knew they were humans, but I didn't know what country they flew or which side they were on. If these aliens were being helped by our own, then the best way to take them down was their resource. Us. Look, Martinez, I'm going to follow these guys, and I need you to do something. Get access to line route listings. Whoever these guys are, they must have come off a coordinated route to get here. Or they were already here. Either way, there must have been a ship that came within Gliaz's aerospace. Can you get me the nationality of any of those ships? She hesitated and groaned incoherently. My forehead darkened from the burn. Martinez, can you do it?
Yes, sir.
I exhaled with relief. All right, the invisibility cloak is working well for me. I don't have to use my other tools. They're not equipped to screen for that. So mark that down for Command to know.
Got it, Captain Dawson.
For now, I need to follow those humans. How those traitors even communicated with them was amazing. If I captured one of the humans, I could definitely ask. It was a risky proposition, though. Getting back to the area, I hid behind a building and peeked out at the human's hovercraft. I gritted my teeth. It was going to be annoying trying to stop a moving vehicle, plus I didn't know how fast it was. But I already knew the possible path outside of the base. Since it was a low-ground hovercraft, I could cut it off some distance from the entrance. I reached outside of the base as quickly as I could, and thankfully the humans weren't in a hurry to leave. By the time I reached next to a cluster of trees, I picked a spot where the Kreans would not see my attempt to ride the back of the craft. I looked up the incline to see the hovercraft loitering at the Krean's base opening. No mistake could be made, so I bided my time until it drove down the path. It came out of the reaches of the base. I ran forward, and as it passed, I grasped onto the back of the craft. My fingers tightened onto the bars curving around the cold surface of the hovercraft, but the loud cries of Kreans sent a frigid chill up the spine of my body. A Krean vehicle slipped in behind ours and stared at me with its ugly face, a disgrace to my eyes. This wasn't good. I tried to move, but an energy blast scorched the craft next to mine. Sparks spat on my hand and burnt through the armor of my suit. My desperate grasp failed and I had to release it. I rolled into the jungle like a discarded wild hog. The alarms from the suit blared in my head, but I ignored those and got up. I ran further into the forest, and once I slowed to a crawl, my head pounded its complaint as I caught my breath. My tongue tasted bitter as the forest became quiet.
Captain Dawson, what happened?
Her voice crackled as the connection tried to overcome its problems. Martinez, I asked in a low tone. My suit must have been damaged, or there could have been something affecting the signal.
Captain Dawson, are you compromised? The signal has been sent to the cruiser sitting off the orbit to abort the mission.
They're going to leave me stranded on this planet. I wasn't even surprised, but my anger could take a back seat for now. I needed to escape this rock. How long? I asked as I stomped through the cold grasp of the forest.
Captain Dawson, hold on. Raise your position, because I'm getting incomplete data from you. Something is wrong with the transfer of data.
I looked around. The hovercraft had already left my sight, but nothing moved around me. No animal or sound was heard. It was too quiet.
Captain Dawson, answer me.
The connection was getting worse. My eyes settled on the spot in the forest where my pod was buried. I'm around 500 yards from my escape route. I'm leaving. Prepare for my docking in 1 hour.
You better get there in 30 minutes. They can't stay there for you much longer.
They never had my back in the first place. I would be lucky to not get court-martialed when I got back. A blast of fire ripped through the earth in front of me. I spun on my heel without even looking, for as soon as I hopped around the tree, it fell, as an Uzcar powered into the space behind me. Its red orb glowing bright and ready to cut me down into black soot. I needed to get under it, so I doubled back and slid under another blast of its beam. My legs gained the vigor of what life I had left to live, and I sped into the forest with a myriad of wildfires burning the forest into its charred leaves and melted earth. The Uzcars moved around the trees, their creaks as they bent over in the trawling march of the Uzcars. I moved around a tree and I froze right in front of an Uzcar. It didn't move, and neither did I, but the rustled bushes next to me shouted my presence. That red orb glowed as the Uzcar pulled its head back. I ran like a frightened insect. The Uzcar blasted its beam, shattering trees down in front of me, cutting them into reddened wood. A cry ripped through my soul, and a fox-like mammal flew out of the upheaved shrubs with only its torso left. The decapitated body slammed into the crater the beam created. Flickers of flames fell onto me, rolled down my cloaked suit, and showed my shape. Once the Uzcar saw me, it fired again. I rolled, and the blast shot up around me. Dust and tiny stones rained from the upturned earth. I dropped a hammer of energy into my legs and jumped into a sprint. It was indiscriminate. They were blasting anything that moved or looked like it was moving. My best option wasn't to hide, but to keep my distance, so my path was as wide of their beams as possible. I ran through the forest's edge. My breath struggled with each pounding step. I couldn't see a thing through the passing leaves and branches. My feet slipped, so I reached and grabbed a branch. It broke, sending me back first into the rocks. I groaned in annoyance, but remembered the situation I was in, so I whirled onto my knees and glanced around for any dangers. Nothing was nearby. The disconcerting sounds of the forest burning before the might of the Uzcars rattled me. I inhaled and swallowed as I gathered my breath. They sought me out, but there was no way they were going to find me looking at a distance of 100 yards between me and their matching troop. I kept low and used my cloak to my advantage. If they can't see me, and I didn't move, they couldn't pick up my location. Once they were gone, I could sneak back to my ship and get out of there.
Captain Dawson, I got some information for you.
I breathed out in exhaustion. My body creaked to the rigor of everything. Let me know what it is.
I have one rebel ship that has gone off-grid. No information has been forthcoming on their whereabouts.
Sweat came down my flushed face. The rebels will do anything to win, I suppose.
Do you really think they were involved?
Martinez said. I don't know. Martinez said.
You've got to get back, and then we can talk about this with command.
The Uzcars were distant dots now. It was time to move. I breathed out and shook off the rust, leaves and dust as I stood tall. A Krian vehicle crashed into a tree, toppling it over, and screeched to a spot 20 yards away. Krians came out, and I crouched back down. They came out with purpose, flipping their heads around the forest, obviously looking for me. I shuddered when I saw a human tool, a spectrum scanner. That was the thing that could have dug me out of my hole. It could pick invisibility cloaks. I backpedaled, and a snap cried into the air from the fallen branch I stepped on. The Krians shot their head in my direction. I had the worst luck. Freezing, I stayed still, hoping they would look away. At least, that was what I hoped. But when I was backed into a corner, what did I have? One Korean said something aggressively to the others, and they moved closer to my location. I pulled out my blaster pistol. They crept closer and raised their guns ready to fire at anything that moved. Namely, me. One Korean was using the spectrum scanner, but not in my direction. Their cries came out like hisses. My leg muscles tightened on the assumption I was going to jump into action. A beep was heard. One of the Koreans stopped, and its head tilted. That Korean spoke in a low voice before it cried out louder to its comrades. They all stopped, turned around, and headed back to their vehicle. After the hatch closed and it sped off, I breathed out a sigh of relief. That was way too many close calls for a lifetime. I waited a few minutes and finally mustered up the courage to walk the final stretch of distance to the crash site. Slipping under the wide expanse of greenery, I reached the edge of where my pod was hidden. There was nothing around me, so I was in the clear. I did it. I was now home, free. After I pressed the button on my wrist control, the earth above the pod spurted out in a wave as the pod spun out of the ground. One step was made by me before the ship got blasted into a burst of flying metal and stones. I was thrown back into the crowded forest floor. No, it couldn't be. I spun around to get up. A red burning blast soared over my head and cut through the trees behind me. I dropped low and ran around the Oscar and falling trees crashing into the dirt. Feathers spurted out from the charred remains of birds. I ducked under a trunk that spun at me, and as I jumped over another fallen tree, my ankle caught on a rock, toppling me. I gritted my teeth, the dust raining down upon me. It thinned into specks and revealed Koreans aiming guns at me.
Captain Dawson.
I breathed out. My heart pounded in my head as I squeezed my eyes shut to settle down the rage. This wasn't going to make me beg for mercy. Martinez, you're seeing what I'm seeing, right?
Yes, Captain.
Her voice cracked. Oscars appeared behind the Koreans. The Koreans primed their weapons, for they clicked and screeched their war readiness at me. Remember what you saw. Remember all of these faces, I said. The Oscar's orb glowed and its light blinded me, burning me into the history books. Hey, sci-fi horror fans. It's Thomas. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment. And remember, stay cosmic.